I'm looking at your journal entries and I'm noticing a number of things, and I wanted to go over them because it seems to be a symptom of other errors that you'll encounter with the remaining months. First one is this transaction, I believe, was already done for you. And then it should be cash debit and common stock credit. But here, in the next transaction, and this is where it all goes sideways in terms of the entries that you're recording, is it looks like you're recording entries in reverse. First, we want to say, okay, we spent $6,500 on baking supplies, but we didn't pay cash for those supplies. Two things are happening here. You're increasing the amount of baking supplies you have on hand, and that's an asset to you. If you can take a look at the chart of accounts, you'll notice also that the chart of accounts will delineate the particular accounts by groups: asset groups, liability groups with what you owe, equity groups, your revenue and your expenses. It's important to refer constantly to this chart of accounts so that you can use only accounts that are listed, but also understand what those accounts are. If you're talking about cash, it's an asset. And how do we handle assets when we're recording transactions? So in this case here, baking supplies is probably a good account, but it's not intended to be credited. It's increased. And secondly, you're not using cash for this particular transaction. This transaction here looks fine to me. The only problem I've noticed is that you're using an account that doesn't exist. If you take a look again at the chart of accounts, you'll notice that these are options you have for liabilities, and one of those should be used, not this one here. That's more the description of what occurred, not necessarily the account itself. Again, here, it may not be an understanding of what exactly is happening, but you are paying out $3,000. So with assets that are going down, you have to credit that. And I don't see any amount here. Actually, and also, you're not paying, it's not called a bakery lease. If you use the chart of accounts as a guide, it's called rent expense. So really take the time to look at that chart of accounts, because it's going to help you and guide you in many ways on how to use, what accounts to use and what those accounts are, whether they're assets, liabilities, or equity. Here, you're doing the same thing. You purchase a business license, and that's great, but you're decreasing it. You're saying it's an expense that's being reduced, and that's not appropriate. And you're increasing your cash. So this transaction should be reversed. And secondly, you should be using the account that's on the chart of accounts and not another account. Same thing here. Cash register is what it is, but it specifically told you it should be miscellaneous expense. And in this case, you're crediting it, which is not appropriate. And you're debiting cash, which again is not appropriate. You're reducing your cash. And these transactions go on and on. Now, baking supplies should not be used in this case, because according to the transaction, it's equipment that you're purchasing in exchange for common stock. Again, really look at these transactions and think about what they're trying to tell you, because for the most part, they are actually giving you the accounts within the description of that transaction. So here, again, transaction you recorded in reverse. It's not advertising costs. If you look at the chart of accounts, you'll see it's called advertising expense. And again, looking at the chart of accounts and being familiar with it would really help you in this case. This entry is in reverse, and it's not advertising costs. This entry, again, is in reverse. And cash should never be debited when you're purchasing and using cash. Telephone bill received. Again, you didn't pay for this bill yet. You just received it. But I don't see a transaction here. So you need to think about it. You're incurring an expense, and you're also incurring an obligation to pay in the future. Same thing here. You actually have a policy that you purchased in advance for insurance. And I don't see any of that here. I just see a description. And you're not going to record transactions based on description. You're basing it on the specific accounts. In this case, it's going to be a payment in advance. One would suspect will be a prepaid as such. And the cash is not going to be debited in this case, because you're actually writing a physical check and you're paying for it. Here, we've got the cash. We've got bakery sales. I honestly think that this entry here is incorrect, because you have to think about the sales that you've generated for the period, and the sales, according to the instructions, is far more than this. Secondly, there's a part of that sale that you didn't get in cash, and you need to think about how that entry should be recorded. So that one, you need to go back again, look at the transaction, read it out loud, and ask yourself, what is this transaction trying to tell me? What am I trying to see here? what is actually going on with this particular transaction. Did we have a sale? If we had a sale, is it part of it going to be received now and part of it received later? Did we receive everything now, or did we not receive anything right now and part of it will be received later? We just have to think about that. And the transaction is going to be very, very specific as to what has happened. And if I look at these transactions here, it's the same type of thing. You're using accounts that don't exist. You're putting the transactions in the order, in the incorrect order. Here, your payments from your accounts payable, but that's not an account. You have to look at your chart of accounts here. And the same thing here, this entry is not complete. Cash should not be debited at all. If you pay the telephone bill that you've actually incurred last month, you need to remove an obligation and reduce your cash. Again, I'm going to highlight these transactions and send this back to you because these are the transactions that are either incomplete or incorrect at all. Again, you're not using the description as your account category. You must look at your chart of accounts in order to determine that. And again, this is another transaction that I think here is incorrect, because if you're purchasing, if you're making a payment towards your payable, you should be debiting it and crediting your cash. If you're actually purchasing the supplies on credit, then you need to make certain that your asset is debited and your liability is credited. I'm highlighting these as well. Again, a number of transactions just are incomplete or not done or have an error. I suggest strongly that you contact me, because it seems to me that you're not understanding the transaction and what's going on, and you're not applying what you do know to the specific accounts that we will be using in this project. There will not be any transactions that will not meet one or more of these specific accounts. So this is an important tab to review and understand and refer back to when you're looking at your transactions and you're trying to record what actually happened. I hope that when you look at the trial balance, not the trial balance, when you look at your journal entries and also my comments, you'll see that some of the transactions are very much very simple, and the answer or the accounts that you need to adjust are there. You just have to read it carefully. So give me a call or email me if you have any questions about this overview. But I think you have quite a number of entries that you'll really need to look at, because they are either incomplete or incorrect. And as I close, be certain to use the actual account and not the description for your categories. And you'll notice how important that's going to be when you transfer your transactions over to your T accounts and trial balance. I hope this is helpful to you, and by all means, please reach out to me with any further questions or comments.